Revenge films.
It all happened suddenly one day. I was at work when I was contacted by the police. I was told that there were two people who were passed out in critical condition in my apartment. I was confused why there would be two people, but I knew that at least one of the two must be my wife, and so I rushed home. When I arrived, the house was surrounded by policemen doing an investigation, so I asked them what was going on. At first, I thought it might be a robbery, but I was wrong. Our living room was a tight space full of furniture, and apparently a cabinet had fallen onto the two people who were sitting on the couch and completely flattened them, with the shattered glass cutting into them from head to toe. Our living room had turned into a scene straight out of a horror movie. Although the police were fairly certain it was an accident, they were doing an investigation just in case to make sure there was no foul play involved. They even asked me for an alibi. However, since I was at work at the office all day, my alibi was quickly verified, and it was obvious that I had nothing to do with this incident, so I was free of any suspicion or blame. The policeman said, "All I could say is sorry, as I hate to give you this news while you're still in shock and grieving. I'm sure this would be hard to swallow without the accident, but please try to stay calm." I remembered he seemed excessively sympathetic to me. At the very least, until I was able to get home and find out what had happened, I was truly worried sick about my wife. But what I heard from the policeman on the scene gave me a different kind of shock to the core. The two people who had been carried to the hospital were my wife and my wife's male friend. For some reason, the two were not wearing any clothes and completely naked when found, and their clothes were thrown off to the side of the room. In addition, there was no reason that the cabinet should come falling down unprovoked, and upon investigation, they found that one of the legs had been broken, most likely by blunt impact. The cabinet was old and already may have had some cracks in it. The force of one push combined with the weight of the cabinet must have caused it to come crashing down. Some kind of blunt impact, you say? Yes, that's right. In that moment, I could clearly picture what the two of them were doing to create such an impact on the cabinet. Just as depicted, the two of them must have gotten into it on the sofa next to the cabinet, and in the heat of the moment must have knocked into it. When the policeman was speaking to me with such sympathy and regret, I could only figure that it must have been in regards to this. The two of them were taken to the hospital. They both had to undergo major surgery, and about 4 days after her surgery, my wife finally woke up. However, because the glass had also gotten into her throat and she suffered major injuries, my wife was in a state where she wasn't able to move or speak. According to the doctor, it was unlikely for her to make a full recovery. On top of that, because her nerves were also cut, she was paralyzed in her right arm, and her face and chest were covered in visible stitches that would leave permanent scars. And the day after that, we found out that the man that was taken in alongside my wife had passed away. We heard that the reason was because of the heavy bleeding he suffered. After some time had passed, I brought a lawyer to the hospital to check in on my wife. My wife's parents were there, and they must have heard what happened from the policeman because the moment I arrived at the hospital, my in-laws immediately asked for my forgiveness. Please don't leave my daughter! But that daughter of yours, she betrayed me! I tried to reply, but her mom cut right in.
Can't you see that my daughter is already paid for what she has done? Please, we beg you to please have some mercy. Please!
They kept pushing and pushing, even dropping down to their knees to beg. Looking at my in-laws like this, I could still only feel coldness inside of me. First of all, when I messaged my wife that day during my lunch break, she told me she was out for lunch with a friend. That was a lie. By that time, the two of them probably had their hands all over each other. After that, my wife suffered critical injuries, and we were going to have lasting difficulties. And even then, there was no way that I could gladly say that I would take responsibility and look after her after that. Her parents kept looking at me with desperate eyes, but my wife told me that she was having coffee with a friend and lied to me, all while she was having a full-blown affair and enjoying herself like that. That was the reason for this incident. And yet you still want me to wipe her butt and bear the consequences? You must be kidding. As soon as I said that, her parents' faces did a full 180 and turned from sorrow and regret straight into anger. Do you not have a heart? Are you even human? You monster! You devil! How much do you think my daughter is going to have to suffer for the rest of her life? It's your job as a husband to support your wife, especially in times of need. If anything, this never would have happened if she hadn't gotten married to you. And he tried to turn it on to me. Oh, this is my fault, is it? I'd like to take those words and point them directly at my wife then. My wife said that she wanted to become a full-time housewife, So in order to fulfill her wishes and give her the life she wanted, I had been working day and night to provide for us. And what she gave me in return was to use all my money and have an affair with some other guy. This made both my parents go quiet. Their eyes, however, remained burning towards me and spoke volumes. I went to see my wife, who couldn't move at all, and she kept looking at me with her eyes as if she wanted to say something. She was trying to move her mouth, but it was fruitless. I left the stack of $1,000 on the table next to her in the hospital room. As soon as you're discharged from the hospital, I'll be available to speak, so contact me then, and turned away to go home. As I was walking out the door, my mother-in-law said loudly enough for me to hear,
My poor daughter. My poor daughter.
She kept repeating it, but this was all my own wife's doing, so I couldn't feel sorry for her. While my wife was in the hospital, I went through my wife's phone as well as her partner's phone to gather evidence of their affair, and I brought it to the lawyer's office once again to decide what settlement fee to collect. According to what we found, it was discovered that my wife had been having this affair for more than half a year. Meanwhile, to prioritize my wife and give her the life she wanted for being a full-time housewife and relaxing at home, I had been working extra overtime and had been requesting more business trips because of the additional stipend I would receive. Perhaps this made my wife feel more lonely because she had less time with me, but in reality, she was happy that I gave her more time and opportunity to have an affair. The more I thought about this, despite my wife being in the current state that she is, I couldn't help but be overwhelmed with anger. Regardless of how busy I was, I had been saving up a little extra on the side so that we could celebrate her birthday or our wedding anniversary together, but she had even used all that money for herself. After all of that, I had a hard time trying to forgive her, much less feeling like I should support her moving forward. As a result, it was decided that my wife's division of property was offset by how much she had used, and that I would be collecting a settlement fee of $20,000. And as for the late cheating man, we sued his widowed wife for a sum of $30,000. We had found out that she would be getting a large settlement from his expensive life insurance policy, so she would be paying from that amount. In return, since I would be divorcing my wife, I told her that she can sue for a settlement from my ex-wife as she pleased. Since we were both victims in the end, she agreed, and so I had my wife's side pay the full settlement fee. Although, of course, the people who would actually pay it were my former in-laws. Even though they kept calling me a monster back at the hospital, they must have thought that it'd be too embarrassing for their relatives and the people around them to find out the exact circumstances surrounding their daughter's accident. Typically, people would feel extremely sorry for them if they found out that their daughter was in an accident, but if they found out that it was in the middle of having sex during an affair, surely it would change the way people felt about it. Since I was going to be divorcing her, they would also be the only ones who could take care of her now. In return for paying the settlement in full, they begged me to, please don't tell people that it was an accident that happened in the middle of an affair. I thought that was quite bold of them to ask, but I wanted to end any relationship with their family and move on as quickly as possible, so I agreed to their terms. Well, I can't speak for the widowed wife, and she's free to do as she wants. She lost her husband, and in the middle of an affair at that. So there's a chance that she would be angry that my ex-wife was the only one who survived. But that's not any of my business anymore. My job here was done, so she's free to do as she wants. Trying to put all this behind me, I didn't want to continue living at the scene of the accident, so I signed a contract for a new one-bedroom apartment and I moved. The only thing that I was glad about was that my wife and I didn't have any kids. I originally wanted them, but
If we have kids, then we won't be able to go on holidays or have our own time anymore. So I want to wait a little bit longer before we have a child.
and my wife had stopped any efforts to have children. Looking back now, I think all of it was very lucky. I couldn't help but feel like this incident was truly divine punishment given the timing. If it had happened in any other way, perhaps my ex-wife and her partner wouldn't have had to become victims. But if there was a child in between this, then it would have increased the amount of time that she would be at home, and therefore in the living room. And if the same thing happened when my child had been the victim in the accident, I don't think I would have ever been able to recover. Of course, it's not that I was happy that this happened to my ex-wife, as it was a terrible accident. But more than anything, I couldn't help but be glad that it was her and not our child if we had one. After the accident, my ex-wife went to over a year of therapy. In order to pay back the loan that her parents had fronted her, she went back out to find a job, but was unable to work properly. She had never even had a job to begin with because she was intent on becoming a housewife. But this time she had scars all over her face, wasn't able to speak or use her right arm. It's really not my place to worry about my ex-wife anymore, but since she can't use her voice and has so many scars all over her body, I can only imagine it would be hard for her to find another partner in the future, too. I'm sure her parents knew that reality, and that's why they were so desperate to keep me. In that situation, even living alone or making a living for yourself would be pretty difficult. So who knows how or when she'll ever be able to pay back the loans. My ex-wife must be feeling so regretful and guilty now. But I can't help but feel it's a little too late for that. After betraying me and using me the way that she did, I don't think my sympathy will ever be shared for my ex-wife.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.